This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Artisanal Agency, the exclusive representative of the This Week in Tech podcast network. Reach Twit.tv's tech-savvy, affluent, highly engaged audience by booking your campaign now. Visit artisanalagency.com to find out more. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 569, the official truck of meth dealers. Monday, November 25th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Yes, social media's role in politics again dominated the headlines after Google pulled back on microtargeting and Facebook received a tongue lashing from an unlikely source. But are we finally moving in the right direction? Probably not, but we'll discuss it anyway. Also, why Google's ad slowdown may mean doom to search-driven businesses, retail's brand balancing act, what YouTube taught us this year, plus this week's fair, fail, foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with keynote speaker, author, and consultant, and the man in plaid himself, Mr. Jay Baer. Hey, Jay.
Bob, recording this from home, so I am wearing a plaid bathrobe.
I don't want to envision that. Now, next, I was so glad to have him back last week. We thought we'd bring him back for round two. The founder of the idea integration company, Mr. Saul Colt. Hi, Saul.
Hey, Bob. I'm not wearing plaid anything.
Okay, that's another disturbing visual, but we won't go on to that. And finally, we have the newly installed VP of Decision Strategy at Quantum Metric, Ms. Tamara Gaffney. Hi, Tamara.
Hello, it's good to be back.
It's great to have you on the program. Well, if you've been listening to this show, I don't know if you guys have been listening, but the people out there, hopefully they've been listening. You've heard us talk a lot about big tech and the turmoil of political ads. And this was a massive news week regarding big tech, political advertising, and how hate is given a voice on these platforms. And I'm going to break it up into two parts and first talk about the Google news because that dominated most of the headlines. Google announced that they will be seriously restricting the targeting tools available to political advertisers, which should have seemed to be a good move, but it seems to have satisfied no one. Some people were tepid in their praise, others were downright vicious about it. Tamara, what's at the heart of the criticism, and is it fair?
Well, just to recap, what we saw is Twitter said no political ads at all.
Right.
Google said, okay, political ads, but you can't micro-target them. And then Facebook said, do what you want. We don't have any rules. So essentially,
that's a good summary.
Essentially, they've tried between these major social platforms, they have tried every single approach, and none of them are actually getting a lot of love for what they're trying to accomplish. It's a really complicated subject. I think that the micro-targeting method might be the best because if you're forced to buy big audiences, you're not going to want people to see some of the things that you're putting out that are, let's just say, not as accurate as the others might be.
Are they trying to emulate, is the whole point to emulate the TV model where you have to buy huge audiences at a time and there's less chance for slipping in some kind of message that only a particular group is going to see? Because that's
the idea. And one of the things that's been talked about, for example, with the Twitter ban is how are they going to enforce all the different advertising entities that put out political advertising? Are they going to look at every bit of creative every time? Because most of these social media platforms have automated ad buying systems. So they don't actually really see everything all the time unless they have some AI built to identify political ads. Then on the Facebook side, there's no ban at all. So political action committees, this was the part of the subject of the article, political action committees, and then sort of black money or the money that goes into the political system to run advertising that isn't coming from a candidate. So I guess one of the major questions coming out is, how do you know it's a political ad?
Oh yeah, I mean that's an ongoing problem. I mean, I assume that they have to register something when they first start buying ads to say that they're a political organization of some kind. You'd want to do that for tax reasons, right? So they would have some indication about who's a political organization, but that doesn't stop me from running ads that are of political nature and not properly registering them as being a political ad. It's just me advertising a distinct cause. They wouldn't. No, that seems like that would fly under the radar. I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, to me,
it really doesn't. Sorry, go ahead.
No, to me, it makes more sense to have self-policing, and by that I mean, when we looked at fake news coming across our Facebook feed, we would go to Snopes and we would check to see if it was correct. And so we need a Snopes version for political advertising. To me, something that lives outside of social media and helps us all check whether it's true, but it has to be neutral, can't be biased.
So I'm a big fan of, zero targeting, because if everyone sees everything, I think that actually is a great thing because it'll cause conversation, more actual going and figuring out what's real, what isn't real. And, I don't believe in self-policing. I don't believe that self-policing would work because, if, what is a political ad? When I'm hearing this description of what Google is saying they can do and what they can't do, I would just completely get 1,000 fake accounts to start pushing my messaging through and not do it directly from the person. And it's pretty much exactly what, I assume was done through the Russian, election things and stuff like that. Like there should literally be no targeting, no anything. Everyone sees everything. Take it back to the 50s. If you have something to say it because everyone's going to see it. Everyone's going to cause a conversation. Whereas this, you can do this, you can't do this, the micro-targeting, all this stuff, until there is a clear definition of what is a political ad. So if I'm paid as an influencer to say this candidate's better than that candidate and I'm paid for it, is that a political ad? Well, absolutely. But how do you police that? And, how do you go around that? Because I guarantee you, even when the Gap or Old Navy pays influencers, only a third of them put that hashtag ad on there. And I don't believe it would be any different when it comes to politics. It'd probably be even less.
But I'm thinking that the problem here is not an endorsement. I don't think that that's what the main concern of political advertising on social media is all about. It's about issue-based advertising. It's about, spreading lies and half-truths in order to make a candidate look bad or to make another candidate look better in the eyes of their base. It's an argument of the mind, right, Jay? I mean, this is not something that's going to be solved just by getting rid of the political ads or solving it by putting, restrictions on micro-targeting.
Yeah, I don't really understand the targeting restriction as a solution, right? So what we're saying is you can buy ads as long as you buy them unwisely, right? as long as you waste money by buying ads broader than your actual targeted audience, then you can do whatever you want. That seems crazy to me. I would argue that Twitter's ban is the best thing Twitter's done in 10 years. That they actually said, you know what, we're just not going to do this, and we're going to take a stand. And I really appreciate that from Twitter. Now, I think the point is well taken by the entire panel that saying you're going to ban a category of advertising without being able to definitively determine what fits in that category is a bit of a Pandora's box, certainly. But at least you've got a leg to stand on there. I think the reason that Google's move fell so flat is it is by definition a half measure. It is a half a solution, and they also are not a very beloved company right now for a number of different reasons. So I just don't know that I don't know that the targeting limitations really solves anything ultimately, because people are going to find ways to get around that. I think you either have to take Twitter's approach or Facebook's approach, which is, you know what, let the market solve its own problems and people are smart enough to determine what's real and what's fake, or no political ads at all. But boy, that really puts you at a disadvantage from a business standpoint, right? To say, look, I mean, you know, just on television alone, Michael Bloomberg is making the largest TV buy in the history of American politics right now, and you would think at some point social would be part of that. And if you're Twitter to just say, yeah, we're just not going to take any of that money, it's like, wow, that's putting your money where your mouth is, quite literally.
Well, let me ask this to the panel then. I mean, what could they be doing better? What could they be doing? I mean, I don't think there's any way to solve this problem, because like you say, Jay, it's either get rid of the ads or let the ads be, but these half measures don't go anywhere. So is there no middle ground? Is there no way that these platforms can deal with political advertising in any kind of meaningful way? I mean, do we have to just put a ban on all political speech on platforms? I mean, that sounds ludicrous.
Yeah.
I'm for all the ads you want, as long as every single person sees it. I think we should be able to see the same messaging throughout the entire country. One, it makes it for smarter messaging. It really, you have to be far more strategic. If you're going broad than when you're going targeted, you can't do the whole, I'm for the little guy in rural America on a national basis. Like, I think there's something really interesting about taking it back to the old way of doing things, and what you said, traveled everywhere. Now, there's messaging just for, it's like, people who hate a certain group of people. There's messaging for people who love a certain group of people. Like, it'd be a really interesting experiment to see one universal messaging go out for a whole campaign. Or I think it would also be really interesting to have no ads whatsoever. Let it stick to real news. Let it be handled by news organizations that are held to a certain standard, and then disseminated that way. Because it's like, we all know all the tricks. We're all smart marketing people. I don't know what the political version of there's only 2 hotel rooms left to purchase, order now, or I don't know what all the things, but for all we know, that there's targeted ads going on saying you're not welcome to vote in your area, or all sorts of different things. There's a lot of psychological warfare that goes on in political advertising. So cut it all out, or just make it one message for everybody.
And Tamara, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm gonna just have to disagree on the front that I like targeted advertising because it allows people who don't have big money to get their message out. And one of the things that has always been a concern is the amount of money it takes to get elected, and how few people who actually may have great values and be a fantastic candidate can actually get there. How much lobbyist you have to take money from in order to get to the big stage. And so by telling everyone they have to pay to target people that they don't want to target, you're essentially making it more expensive, which is a limitation, but it's only a limitation for people who can't afford to do that. I do take the point that you have no rock to hide under when you're going mass, but at the same time, you're taking away, like I said, a lot of the more less funded candidates. And this cuts both ways. This is not just a Republican Democrat thing. This cuts to all kinds of different issues. For example, in my local area, we had a school bond measure, and I started getting Facebook ads on it. Would those have been banned?
Well, not on Facebook, because they don't have a ban, but yeah, I get your point. Your point is really well taken.
So my point is really more for national campaigns and things like that. And I still stand, absolutely, you're entitled to disagree with me. I stand by what I say, because, we're not going to have a Dave in the White House, that 80s movie where Kevin Kline went from mayor to be president. Because even, the mayor that's running for president right now, they've got lots of money behind them. But if you're elected president, you're the president for everybody. Whether you're with that party or not, you're supposed to look after everyone in your country. So why wouldn't your message be for everybody? Like, it's actually a cop-out to pick and choose and target. Like I get why it's done. It's how elections are won, and you target areas that have larger electoral colleges and all sorts of things, or you target where you're weaker and not where you're stronger. But I really think once you're elected, you're for everybody. So why not be for everybody from the very beginning? Everyone says they are, but nobody actually follows through in practice.
But if we did that, we wouldn't have our voter suppression efforts. We wouldn't be able to go and spread all kinds of misinformation in communities we don't want to vote.
Yeah,
well,
what
then
will
I
happen
take it all back. That sounds fun.
As a practical matter, as a former political scientist and as somebody who started my career running political campaigns for Congress and governor and president even, what will happen is if we say this only applies to national candidates, then what will happen is you will have a different committee for every state. So instead of having the committee to elect whomever president, you'll have the committee for people in Arkansas to elect this president. So then it won't be a national campaign. It'll be a collaborative of 50 state campaigns. And if that gets shut down, then it'll be 2,000 municipal campaigns. I mean, that's, look, politics is like porn in that eventually there's enough people with enough money at stake that they will find all the loopholes, right? So, that doesn't mean that that doesn't help to make them work harder to find the loopholes, but ultimately the loopholes will be discovered.
Well, speaking
when you said it was like porn, I thought you were going to say you hate yourself 3 minutes after you vote.
3 minutes before you vote, actually.
Well, this brings up another issue that was talked about a lot this week because Sacha Baron Cohen, the comedian and actor, while accepting an award from the Anti-Defamation League, took the opportunity to read the riot act to all of big tech and specifically singled out Mark Zuckerberg. Look, without saying too much about what the complaints about Mark Zuckerberg were, straying into the weeds on Facebook, I mean, these platforms are being used to amplify hate speech. So what's our responsibility as advertisers in that mode? Because, we can talk a lot about political ads. Should they be on the platform? Shouldn't they be on the platform? Microtargeting, spreading of misinformation via advertising. But there's also the ongoing fact that these platforms are the biggest, most productive, most effective propaganda machines that have ever been created in the history of the world. And, if that's the case, if they're that bad for society, what do we do about that? I mean, do we as advertisers need to, as a block, take our business elsewhere until Facebook, Twitter, Google gets their act together on this? I mean, do we have a responsibility not to advertise on these platforms while they're allowing these types of diatribes to go on and this type of misinformation to be spread?
So I'd like to say, it's a bit of a digression, but in this world that we live in, with outrage culture and cancel culture, we should be putting comedians and satirists on our shoulders and marching them around as heroes, because they're the only people brave enough to hold a mirror up to society, and we shouldn't take that lightly. Instead of actually trying to suppress these sort of thoughts and opinions, we should be giving a louder voice for people like Sacha Baron Cohen to say these sort of things, because there's very few people who are willing to really say these sort of things, or so that full kind of hat off, tip my hat to that. As for your question of should we stop advertising, in a beautiful society, absolutely. But the minute a major brand stops advertising, their competitor will just buy their slot. It's never going to happen. What I do like about what Sacha Baron Cohen said was treat them like broadcasters, treat them like news outlets, have them actually be held to a set of standards and fact checking, where 60 Minutes can't send out hate speech and things like that. Even Saturday Night Live has censors and broadcast standards and things like that. We should treat these. They are journalists. They are broadcasters. They are news generating systems. It might be user-generated content, or however we want to describe it, but the fact is they're reaching way more people than Fox News and CNN and all these networks put together. So why aren't they being held to the same standard? And if you guys remember, might have been last election. I don't remember exactly when, but man, Facebook and Zuckerberg and Sarah Sandberg fought really, really, really hard to not be classified as a news outlet because they didn't want to be held to the I forget what it's called when you have to give all the candidates the same amount of time. There's like a
Equal time,
name
yeah.
for equal time. They didn't want to be held to that. But like the truth is, more people get their news from them than anywhere else, so they have to be treated the same as a major media center.
Good point. Well, I think we've talked enough politics, and it's time to move on and talk a little bit about what Google's slowing growth could mean to businesses that are dependent upon search. It seems like there's a little competition brewing there. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor for this evening. Look, if you're trying to reach tech-minded customers, we're talking about the geeks out there, the nerds, the people who know everything about computers and know everything about technology. Maybe you're in tech yourself. Maybe you have a product that's just something that's going to want to explore some new high-income markets and the tech audience seems appealing to you. Whatever kind of audience you have that's looking for tech, I can connect you with what is arguably the most responsive and lucrative technology-minded audience out there, because our sponsor, Artisanal Agency, is the exclusive representative for Twit.tv. That's the This Week in Tech podcasting network. We're talking about shows, classic podcast shows like Mac Break Weekly, iOS Today, Windows Weekly, This Week in Tech. And that's just 4 of their many amazing shows, all of which are generating phenomenal results for sponsors. Now listen to these numbers. 50 million downloads a year. 70% of that audience directly works in tech. And 82% of them say that they have bought a product directly as a result of a Twit.tv ad recommendation. And remember, they are offering an actual live read recommendation here, just like the kind of ad that you're hearing me read for them right now. And they take that responsibility very seriously. Not just anyone can advertise on Twit. Artisanal Agency carefully vets each sponsor so that their hosts can offer your brand a genuine recommendation, while at the same time you can relax knowing there won't be any brand safety issues because everybody's vetted. You know exactly who you're running against. It's great. And it doesn't matter whether you're coming in with a completely baked campaign or you need everything from the ground up, graphics, ad copy, whatever. Artisanal Agency makes it easy for you either way. They ensure your campaign will run seamlessly, from onboarding hosts to delivering creative assets to monitoring ad reads. They'll do it all for you. So reach out today to start your campaign on the Twit.tv network. Visit artisanalagency.com. That's artisanalagency.com. You'll find the link on the show notes for this show to find out more, or email them, find out more directly from them, have them talk to you. hello@artisanalagency.com. That's hello@artisanalagency.com. Start your next podcast ad campaign with a show from Twit, and we thank them very much for their support of our show, the BeanCast. Well, as the fabled Google ad machine starts to slow down ever so slightly, they're beginning to cast about for new revenue sources. But as a recent CNBC interview with venture capitalist Chamas Palahapitiya, I think I got that correct, points out, this could be an incredibly tough thing for businesses like travel booking sites that depend entirely on Google searches, almost entirely on Google searches for their business, since Google is getting more and more competitive for these same customers with their own services via search. And from what a lot of people are saying, actually prioritizing the search results for their searches over their competitors. So Jay, how does a business that relies almost entirely on search navigate waters like these?
Yeah, it impacts everybody right now. This idea that Google is going to present you the information that you need without you having to engage in a subsequent click changes everything, right?
It
I mean,
really
even in
does.
the SEO community, right? There's this whole principle now of position 0 in search, right? Used to be, you have to try to be number 1. Now you have to try to be number 0, which is all the things that happen before they start to show you search results. The answer box, the rich snippet, the map pack. It's really fascinating. And the reality is you either need to aggregate an audience elsewhere, i.e. social media, which you see so many DTC brands doing in Instagram and elsewhere, or, and I know Saul will back me up on this, you need to turn your customers into your best marketers, right? You need to get serious about word of mouth instead of taking word of mouth for granted, as we have been doing for the last 100 years. We've had it pretty easy. You give Google money and customers spit out the back door. But you better start thinking about a situation, even if it's just a thought exercise for now. What if Google didn't exist? Would your business still exist? That's something that everybody should at least sit down and have a conversation about in a conference room over the holidays.
Yeah, so go ahead, Tamara.
Let me just add to that a lot of companies, so many companies, have got Google Analytics installed on their websites. They're literally giving Google all of their data. And there's not a lot of guardrails that prevent Google from using that data to understand their market and then forward integrate. And the latest one is banking. The latest thing that they've announced is that Google is thinking about releasing a checking account. And so they've already damaged the travel industry a while ago and the retail industry with their Google Shopping. And now they're going after financial services. And it is like, the data warfare going on between big tech and companies that are specialized in a particular industry is at a massive high right now.
So I don't be evil. Remember that? I think I was the first person to ever say this. I could be wrong. You guys can fact check later. But don't build your company on other people's platforms. If you're not paying for it, then you're the product. The problem is you're actually paying for Google search and all these things, and they're still not living up to their end of the bargain because they are, selecting their options over yours and putting them in a stronger place. It's a very, very weird time where, and I think I said in the last time, we got to go back to the 50s. This whole boom that we've had in the last, 8 years, 10 years, however long it's been, where, online has owned everything and people have gone rich and all these things. I think, we're kind of getting to the end of it. I think there's still going to be, amazing ways to go crazy and make a lot of money through D2C and all sorts of different things. But man, it's like, remember when community managers were the way that you really harvested your brand and your customers, and people loved you and they referred you left, right, and center and all these things. And then they got replaced with these growth hackers and growth managers. And I think, what we've learned over the last couple of years of this trend of growth hacking is that, it's short-term gains for long-term pains. And we're kind of learning that right now with this whole Google bit. People went all in on this stuff, SEO, all this stuff, and this was the only way, and they sort of forgot how to market. They forgot how to build relationships, and we're kind of at this place now where people are scratching their heads because they threw out all the traditional marketers. They threw out the brand people, and they don't know where to even go from here. Like, where does TripAdvisor go from here, where their whole business has been through link sharing and all sorts of things, and Expedia, I think they're all owned by the same company by now. Where do they go from here? It's almost impossible for them to survive another year if Google just keeps harvesting.
And there seems to be a kind of convergence going on, doesn't there? I mean, it's like Amazon's getting more and more like Google and a little bit more like Facebook, while Facebook's trying to be a lot more like Google, and Google's trying to be more like Amazon. And they're all converged. Even Apple's in that mix. And we're getting down to 4 or 5 gigantic companies that own everything. I mean, Disney owns everything in media, but now is going into all kinds of areas that might take it closer to Amazon in terms of selling product. They've always been phenomenal marketers. Am I going crazy here, or is there just this movement toward gigantic, monstrous companies, kind of like under the Samsung model, where we just make everything and we deal with everything and we
That's
underline
absolutely true.
everything.
But by the same token, then you've got all these brand new companies, little tiny companies that are using, drop ship fulfillment and Shopify and things like that, that say, hey, I've got an idea for a cool new shoe or whatever, and they spin it up and maybe they crowdfund it to begin with, and they're selling things directly through shoppable Instagram ads, and all of a sudden they're in business. So on one hand, yeah, you've got this great consolidation of power in e-commerce and in media. On the other hand, it's never been easier to start a viable company from scratch, and so it's really interesting. It's like a giant bell curve, but nothing in the middle, right? So the middle is getting hollowed out. There is what room is there now for a $50 million company that just kind of does good work? I don't know what the future looks like.
See, but that bell curve, when you talk about it's never been easier, the people starting those T-shirt shops and CBD oils are going to be all the people that aren't working at TripAdvisor anymore. So that that's going to be their safety net of some kind.
I always go back to Spalding Gray's speech in the David Byrne movie True Stories, where he basically outlines the future. It's like the big companies will spin off new ideas with smaller companies, and the small companies will do really well, and then the big companies will swallow them up. And it sounds like what we're moving toward is a future where these companies are being built on the backbone of the bigger companies' infrastructures, and then the bigger company can pick and choose which ones it wants to elevate into the pantheon of their many brands that they're handling. It doesn't seem like there's any way to escape that it's inevitable.
You know what, Bob?
That it go that
let me just throw in here, because I remember when GE was evil and was, swallowing up everything. And I remember when Microsoft was evil and they were swallowing everything. And I remember when Apple was super big and then it became, oh my gosh, Apple's going to die. And then it became big again. What we have seen is that these big companies get too big and then they implode. And so I'm kind of waiting for that moment. I really don't think that the life cycle of history of companies is going to allow anyone to be so big, so long, that it's going to destroy the whole economy. That's just, maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I actually think that they will get too big and they will implode.
So one thing I will say that we haven't touched on all this is I can't pronounce his name. I apologize ahead of time, but Chamath, is that it?
Chamath.
Okay, so this guy is becoming a bit of a media darling by being bombastic and shouting from the rooftops all sorts of sky is falling sort of stuff. He, just 2 weeks ago, he popped up in my feed saying that venture capital as it exists today is a Ponzi scheme, and that's why he's closing his VC firm. And he's had some real bombastic things to say about Slack is the only company that is going to survive a 2020 recession and things like that. I think we're probably going to end up talking about him a lot in 2020 because he seems like he's positioning himself to be, maybe not a thought leader, but he could be Gary V for a new generation of some kind, because he seems to be positioning himself as a media guy that right or wrong is going to always stick with a bold statement, and I think he might be someone interesting to watch for positive and negative reasons.
Good points all. Well, I want to move on, and I'm going to talk about retail brands, because more and more retail brands are starting to realize that the lure to go all in on promotions to drive short-term gains, not games, ignores the fact that long-term brand health still needs image-based advertising. Saul, retail always has this dilemma, doesn't it? Given the thin margins, you don't make much of a profit on every sale, so you've got to move lots and lots of product, lots of volume. So the risk is always there. So you want to discount to make sure the sales are going through. So how do you make a consistent case in this particular sector for balancing promotions with an appropriate level of brand building?
So, Bob, when you throw to me and it's my turn to talk, I usually have a lot to say on topics like this, but my answer today is going to be 40% off. You see what I did there?
Yeah, that's good. That was really good.
That's funny. Thin margins aside, I think the real issue, and I kind of, buried the lead or blew the lead in my last sort of, diatribe rant. But the real issue is that CMOs have less and less time to show their results, and sales and discounts and coupons, and those are the easiest ways to show, like, to have a conversation to their board or to whoever. And things like brand and brand affinity is a longer term, sort of thing to show real results and real successes. So it's being deprioritized. But without doing brand affinity and without doing brand work, you're really, like I said before, with the whole growth hacking thing, it's short-term gains for long-term pains. Because when you're just becoming the coupon and the discount and the promotion-based marketing company, people remember that. And, like Jay talks about all the time, make people your salesmen, make customer advocates. I love the Gap. But in my head, the brand of the Gap is, if it's not on sale today, it'll be on sale in sometime in the next 72 hours. So anyone who buys a regular price is a sucker. And that is the thing that I communicate to everybody when I'm talking about the Gap. I guarantee you that's not their hope and wish and dream, but literally, like, you walk into the Gap, by the time you leave, your phone chirps and you've got a 40% off coupon. And that's just where their brand is to me. And that has to be super dangerous for them. My feeling for the Gap is actually damaging the brand, because I am a talker and I do like share that out. Sales and coupons don't drive emotions. I'm just going to keep singling out Jay. I read Talk Triggers. I've actually read it 3 times. Nowhere in that book did they mention a cool sale or anything like that, because that doesn't drive emotions, and emotions are really what gets people talking about your brand. Brand advertising will always be key to every brand. But, in this day of instant gratification, it's falling by the wayside. So I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you want help with creating a better brand, obviously call me. But beyond that, I don't think people realize how badly sales and coupons damage a brand long term, because they create a permanent, like, image in your brain of what this company is all about.
Jay, you have anything to add to that? Because you were singled out quite a bit in that last bit.
Thank you for the kind words, Saul. I appreciate that very much. Saul is, of course, exactly right that you only have one brand, but you've got lots of chances to weaken it with indiscriminate couponing. It's ironic that we're having this conversation in the fourth quarter, because right now, literally from Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, through the end of the year, is where you see this happen most egregiously. People look at the P&L and say, geez, we're a little off here in the Q4. Or for many brands, the next 6 weeks will be 30, 40, 50% of their revenue. And people get a little nervous, and desperate times call for desperate measures. That's how you end up getting 2 emails a day from a company that only sells underpants. Like, how often do you think I'm going to buy underpants? I'm a dude. Like, it's every 3 years, certainly not twice a day. And
I'm learning all kinds of things about you tonight, Jay.
Yeah, exactly. It is hard, though. I mean, as a consultant, I'm certainly sympathetic to this plight. We see it with our clients all the time. I don't think a lot of people, even marketers on the brand side, would argue that the brand is unimportant, or that promotions are inherently a better approach, but it takes time. And the real question is, do they have the time? Are they being given the time? To me, the guilty party, if you're going to rely too often on coupons, discounts, special offers, et cetera, usually the guilty party isn't the CMO. The guilty party is the CEO, who's not giving the CMO enough rope to do the things that person probably knows they should be doing to actually build the kind of brand equity that allows you to succeed without discounting your brand.
And that's a great point. I want to bring it over to Tamara for this one, because, there's nothing wrong with promotions. I mean, promotions can be overwhelming, and you can do too much of them, and you can sacrifice your brand, but there's nothing wrong with promotions. This is more an argument for balance, that you can't go out with only promotion and not be constantly and consistently establishing your brand over the course of the year, so that when you get to the promotional phase, you get better results, right?
Well, in my world, it was more about B2B marketing, and that's the marketing departments that I've been sitting inside of and listening to this debate for the last 15 years. And what's happened is that with data comes this desire to prove everything has value. And because we have such difficulty proving our brand has value in data, we have walked away from it. And that is partially because the CEO asked us to prove how we spend every dollar. But it's also because, and I'll just, give you an example of awareness campaigns generally have a study of awareness, unaided and aided recall, they call it, where they ask a bunch of people, have you heard of my brand? And what do you think of it if they answer yes? And after watching 9 years of pouring $20 to $25 million into brand advertising, the number of people unaided who were able to answer that they knew our brand had not significantly changed. It was within a point or two, and it would go up and down. And so it was frustrating because we couldn't seem to make it work. And part of the reason why we can't make it work is that the traditional ways that we were advertising, people turn off the ads now. They ad block, they go to streaming services that don't have ads. The televisions were now on Amazon Prime and Netflix instead of on regular television. So it becomes really difficult to reach people through traditional ways. And no one's actually figured out how to do brand advertising that does move the needle and prove it to the CEO. And so I think part of it is that the rules of marketing are just really in flux around brand and how to measure what it means.
So what I hear what you're saying, and I think Jay will back me up. Jay's like my bodyguard here. But when I hear that we can't reach people the traditional way, we can't, they're ad blocking, they're doing all that. The insight that immediately pops to mind is, well, you have their email address, so actually reach them directly, build a community around them, have them find your next round of customers, because that's really like how we should always be doing it. So I absolutely agree with everything you said. It's harder and harder to get out there. So the logical thing would be, well, stop throwing your money into a pit of fire and spend your money on your customers, because that's where the next round of customers will come to. So like I'm not a data guy, and I have a lot of issues with people who live and die on data, because I think you can interpret data any way. You interpreted what you said as one way, and I interpreted it a completely different way. And I think, it was Einstein who said, before me, I'm just making a bunch of fake attribution today, but Einstein, I believe, was the guy who said, not everything great can be measured, not everything measured is great. People forget that all the time. And I really have a hard time working with people who live and die by data when it is completely subjective, and a lot of data is completely subjective. Some is absolutely like, we spent this much, we sold this much, you can't argue.
Let me caveat that and say that data is not subjective, but analysis is. And I think that's where the things fall apart. Analysis can be so subjective, and it's how you spin the data, and that's the real problem.
Well, yeah, and being the data person, I can definitely attest to the fact that you can make any story you want to out of data. In this case that I was looking at, the awareness data, it was not a very good story for brand. And it was partially because the people who were telling the story wanted the money to go to someone else. That was their agenda. And so, they weren't looking at the right way. I do agree with you, Saul, about building a community and building loyalty and retention amongst your customer base is the better way. And that is the only way, as far as I can tell, is to have people who so love the experience that they're getting with your brand that they want to talk about it and they want to tell others. When I did analysis asking people how they would like to find out about a new service, they said directly from their existing friends as number one. And then as number two, it was from unbiased press. So, there really wasn't anything. The social influencer was number 4, but advertising wasn't until number 8 or 9. And most people just jump to, and you're absolutely right to point out that this isn't the right approach, but just jump to, okay, you want me to talk about brand? I'm going to spend, $25 million on video and go television. And that's not going to do it.
And if anybody would like to spend $25 million, please.
Our research.
Go ahead, Jen.
Go ahead.
Please call Saul. Yeah, our research shows our research in the list of purchase influencers for most people. Ironically, I also did a survey specifically on decision-making criteria for elections, and advertising was number 8 there as well. Ironically, considering we had a whole conversation about political personal experiences with candidates are 1 and 2 in that regard. You know, I think we've all agreed here, or at least come around to agreeing that customers are the best way to acquire additional customers. However, yet still fewer than 1% of companies have an actual word of mouth strategy. We just assume that if we run a good business, our customers will notice an actual word of mouth strategy. We don't spend any money or time actually incentivizing or helping our customers tell our story. We just take it for granted. Word of mouth is the best and most effective form of marketing and advertising ever devised. It's also the original form of marketing and advertising, and yet we've completely gone to sleep at the wheel, and it has to stop. And hopefully enough people will suffer even to light money on fire, as Saul said, and finally wake up to the fact that the solution is sitting right under their nose.
Well, I'm going to move on to the last topic because Skype seems to be doing all kinds of funny things to Jay's voice. It's like it was doing to Saul's voice at the beginning. But we love Skype for its free service, but Skype is not always the best solution. Moving on to the final topic of the evening, I just saw an Adweek article by YouTube executive that talked about what the big things that they feel they learned from the platform this past year. First was that local goes global, which I don't know, it seems like it's pretty standard fare. I mean, we've been saying local goes global for about a decade, but maybe there's something you guys got out of it that I didn't. Shopping content became entertainment. That's interesting. And viewers went green. Viewers went increasingly green. And I would add probably a fourth insight, which they really should have paid attention to, is the fact that now being an influencer is the most sought after career profession among young people, which is really kind of scary. But anybody want to take a crack at this one? Tamara, you want to try?
Well, having a 12-year-old who wants to be a social influencer, actually what's really interesting is that the younger generation all want to have a side gig. It's not even just about being a social influencer. It's that they don't actually want to work in corporate America. They want to have a side gig. And that's another whole topic that we can get into later about how the gig economy is changing an entire generation. But what YouTube is finding out is really interesting information around that people watch shopping for entertainment. I guess it's almost the same as when we were watching that shopping channel on television and just spend hours watching it. Is it that, are we killing time that much that we watch shopping? I was surprised by that one.
There's people out there watching people eat. I just watched on Sunday morning, this whole big thing from a Korean trend that started a few years back where people just get in front of the camera and eat stuff. It's huge. I mean, it's gigantic. People are making millions of dollars just eating in front of a camera. So I can believe that people watching other people shop or do shopping activities is something. I mean, people watch people play video games. Why not watch someone clicking on Amazon?
What's interesting to me is that this article almost feels like it's a plant for YouTube to be talked about again, because it is, in what I can tell, is it's starting to decline. It was way up at the top. Social influencing on YouTube was a really big thing. And then YouTube started doing some house cleaning type rules that destroyed certain social influencers' entire income stream. And Jay would know better than me as far as, being a social influencer and how YouTube has changed. But I don't see that the younger generation is actually turning to YouTube as much as they used to. It's kind of going the way of Facebook. And so I wonder how much of this interesting information is really just to get us to talk about YouTube.
I think this is all about getting us to talk about YouTube, quite frankly. These insights were not that amazing to me. Jay, what's your thoughts? Anything you can add? Jay might be having some technical difficulties. We'll go to Saul. Saul, what do you think?
I think it's really.
Yeah, Jay, you're going to have to probably restart your computer and come back to the call. Saul, you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say it's horrifying to think, and I've seen this stat many times, but it's horrifying to think that children today are aspiring to be the next like PewDiePie or whatever, and things like we need doctors and lawyers and ditch diggers and all sorts of other professions and tradespeople. It's yeah, I got nothing on this topic. It's kind of whatever.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and ask them to do a shameless plug, starting with Saul, because Jay's probably restarting and getting back on the call. So, Saul, what would you like to talk about?
Okay, so I think you mentioned it, or Jay mentioned it, or Tamara mentioned, someone mentioned that your whole year is kind of made in the last quarter or the last couple months when it comes to advertising. One thing that also happens at the end of the year is sometimes people have leftover budgets. So if you've been thinking of doing an experiential marketing campaign, have some leftover budget, and you should give me a call. I know it's probably not enough time to do anything this year. So what I'm offering people is you can park your budget with me. That way you don't lose it for next year. And we'll get together in the new year. We'll kick off something really cool. If you're curious or interested, please go to theideaintegration.com. As well as that, if you don't know what we do, we basically make companies and brands great. We do word of mouth marketing. We do experiential marketing. We create spectacles and activations that people talk about far and wide.
And I will say, if you want a big idea, if you're looking for a big idea, even if you have an agency already in place, this is not to take over that business. This is just a big idea that's really going to get a lot of people talking. Saul's the guy to go to, so definitely check him out. Jay's back. So Jay, you can find him at convinceandconvert.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Jay. What would you like to promote?
How am I sounding now, Bob?
You sound so much better.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. So I'm actually super pumped. I have a new podcast which launches on Monday, December 2nd. It is called Standing Ovation. And the tagline for the show is where professional speakers tell the stories of their stories. Each episode, I interview a professional speaker, and we start the show by playing a signature story of theirs from the stage. So 5, 6, 7-minute story. And then we spend the next few minutes dissecting and diagnosing that story. How was it created? How is it polished over time? How has it been changed? So if you are either a speaker, want to be a speaker, want to be a better communicator inside your office or at your church or in your kids' soccer team meetings, whatever you need, it is really inside baseball about how that happens. It's been really, really fun to record a bunch of episodes and kicks off in a week. Standing Ovation, available all the places you get your delicious audio.
And don't forget his books. You got to get his books. He does write a lot of them, and they're all good. Last but not least, we have Tamara Gaffney. You can find her at quantummetric.com. That's the home of the agency, ad tech. I'm not sure what it is. Tell us about it. What's going on in your world, Tamara?
Oh, every time we talk, I'm doing something new. It seems like it's been that kind of a year for me. So I just joined a startup. They are actually been around for a couple of years, since 2016. Quantum Metric is a company that enables businesses to look at their digital experience and help to identify where things are going wrong, quantify, how much traffic is going in certain directions. But one of the biggest things that I've seen is that they launched very recently, a couple weeks ago, a methodology for having people inside an organization be able to collaborate better about data. And that was part of why I was so excited to join this type of company, because what I've discovered about data is that it is not getting socialized in large companies. It's kind of a like gold that you want to hoard and not share. And so these tools are now really directing towards being able to collaborate around insights and findings. So Quantum Metric is my new gig. And I'm super excited. We'll be having our customer conference in San Diego in February. So, come see me. I'm going to be speaking again on the stage.
That sounds great. That sounds awesome. In fact, that's how I met you, was putting you on a little podcast interview at the Adobe conference. So that's something you definitely want to see, is Tamara speaking. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Fair, Foul, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And I got to admit, guys, this fair started off as a fail until I realized that I was being trolled by trolls. It was incredible how this campaign worked. The South Dakota Meth We're On It campaign, the best part about, I don't know what to say about this, Saul. So the Meth We're On It campaign made everybody think, oh, look at these silly hillbillies. They're just saying meth, we're on it. Like we're going to get it, but it sounds like we're all on meth. But then you go to the website, and the website is onmeth.com. So they obviously knew what they were doing. I think this is a brilliant use of people's desire to troll silly ads to make a message go viral. Am I wrong?
No, the Cannes Lion Awards for best ads, they're actually doing it in South Dakota next year because this is going to win all the awards. It's so brilliant. You think of this is an awareness campaign, and it's an awareness campaign inside their state, and they got national coverage on something because it's one of the best pieces of copywriting I've seen in a very long time. When you think of it, the purpose of an ad is to get noticed. The purpose of a great ad is to get people talking, and this is a great ad, great campaign.
Well, the fail of the week was a very interesting one. Tesla unveiled their new Cybertruck at an event in California. And during the unveiling, Jay, they took a metal ball and they threw it at the truck's windows to prove that they couldn't break, and broke 2 of the windows with 2 tries. You got to imagine he kept saying they kept throwing stuff at it all week, wrenches and stuff. But wrenches aren't giant cannonballs. Somebody should have taken a cannonball and maybe tried it first.
I think they did. I saw a video that allegedly was right before the rollout where it was the same ball and it did bounce back, which is weird why it would break once and not the other time. I think, look, Elon Musk is not somebody who leaves a lot of things to chance, typically, at least while sober.
Good point.
I kind of feel like this is the same as the On Meth, that this was actually done on purpose. They got so much more conversation because the windows broke than if they hadn't have broke. You notice that he did the entire press conference right in front. If you look at the actual still shots, he literally is framed by the 2 holes. To me, I feel like this seems like a setup. I could be wrong, but that's my take on it.
I'll take it one step further. You want to compare it to the On Meth thing. Apparently, they've already sold something like 100,000 of these ridiculous
deposits.
ugly trucks.
Yep.
No one who bought this thing doesn't have a connection to meth, and I assume they're dealers because this is the stupidest car I've ever seen in my life.
The meth truck?
Yeah.
That surprises me, Saul. As somebody who triumphs in word of mouth and loves being different, I thought, despite its aesthetics that are somewhat controversial, I really thought you would like it.
Give me a 911 Targa any day. This is the dumbest car I've ever seen in my life. And you got to wonder, is it even street legal? Like there's just so many.
It's the most badass Pontiac Aztek ever, man.
Yeah.
Well, all I know is that Toyota 4Runners are the official car of ISIS, so now these cars are going to be the official car of meth dealers everywhere. So that sounds like a good...
It's funny you say that 4Runners are the official car of ISIS. I don't know if that's real or not, but I made that connection. I watched Jack Ryan, the TV show, and every bad guy drives a Toyota, and I actually made that connection in my brain. So again, I digress.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online.
We got one more.
Oh, we do. We've got the foul.
The last one.
You got the foul. My God.
Saul's on the show so often he knows the rundown better than Bob.
Apparently,
this is the only one I've been looking forward to.
All right. So, Victoria's Secret fashion show has always been kind of a sore spot in a lot of people's craw. A lot of people loved it and tuned into it, and it got them a lot of business for a lot of years, but it also had all kinds of problems like body shaming issues and other types of problems that people put in there. Plus, there was a Jeffrey Epstein connection involved with the former CEO being involved with him. There was all kinds of past gaffes. There's money problems. They canceled the Victoria's Secret fashion show finally, but it's under such a cloud, Tamara. I mean, you look at this and you go, my God, how did this thing exist and last for as long as it did? And now that it's finally going away, it's under such a cloud of awful stuff. I mean, how do they recover from this?
It seems like it is a retailer who has not transitioned and has not redesigned their brand. I think they need to come talk to Saul because they are very behind. And for the most part, whether or not they were going to do the show has nothing to do with why they canceled it. They needed to save the money because they're not doing well financially. They're not getting people to come into the retail stores and buy. I've actually only been in that store once. It is not my kind of store. So I really think that what you're really seeing is the downfall of that particular type of retailer.
So I agree 100%. And Victoria's Secret is a classic example of not listening to the world, not listening to your customers. The four of us on this podcast can certainly agree. I'm someone who's bought a fair bit of lingerie and removed a fair bit of lingerie in my time. And man, has the quality of Victoria's Secret gone downhill over the last 5 or 6 years. And it makes me wonder if they're downgrading their product to pay for this stupid show. Because there was literally no one who was watching the show was actually driving to their store and buying anything. It was for the Jeffrey Epstein crowd. So not only if they did a fashion show and they did it in a different style or way of doing it, if they were doing it for their audience, that's one thing. This was never about the people who were shopping in the show. This was about weird celebrities, weird angel wings, $1 million bras, and it was such a disconnect. Even when their brand was about the show was a weird disconnect, and it never fit. It was the weird car thing from Elon Musk. It was get people to talk about it, but have no real connection to anything that you wanted to drive sales.
Well, now
on a positive note, let me just say that particular show did drive such traffic spikes on the web in its early days that it caused all kinds of existing back-end infrastructure that powers the web to be upgraded. So we can thank it for that to end on a positive note.
But I don't have the stats, but I would love to know if people bought it or they were just going because they streamed it from their website. So if they're just going to watch, or if it actually translated to sales of any kind.
Well, yeah, I don't think it actually translated any sales, but it did increase the internet potential over the course of time.
So the internet is built on the back of lingerie. That's fantastic. We can always hold that close and near and dear to our heart. Well, finally.
And Maroon 5.
I got to wrap this show up, guys. Give me back control of my show. Have a suggestion for the list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's edition of the BeanCast. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just okay, it's you know what I mean? It's totally like that. It's like, I don't know, if it's, it's you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just kind of, it just seems like it's just almost exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
beans.